Hey guys, so glad you're here. Today I'm talking with Andrew Smith, who is our behavior coach, and we usually have our monthly chats. And today we're talking about impulsivity. I know you all have students who struggle with their impulses, and they're quick to react without thinking. And how can you help them succeed? Right? When you are trying to teach and they're constantly blurting, they're constantly getting up, they're constantly touching somebody, they're constantly moving, doing things that they really shouldn't be doing at the improper time, right? So, what can you do about it? How can you help them? And what are some of the reasons behind their impulse behavior? So, you're going to get a lot of information of strategies, interventions, and things that you can do and start applying today to help your students who are very impulsive. Welcome to Behavior Strategies for Class. I am Diane Bachman, your behavior paraprofessional with over 15 years of experience working in special education. And I'm so glad you're here because I'll be teaching you about social emotional learning, behavior strategies, trauma-informed care, and more. So if you are tired of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with your students who have challenging and disruptive behavior, you're in the right place. Now, if you're ready to become more equipped to help your students learn and grow, let's listen in to today's episode. Before we get started, I wanted to encourage you to check out the modified version of the Behavior Intervention Toolkit. It is now called the Impulsivity Print and Go Pack because I know you need trauma-informed, ready-to-use tools that will help you respond to impulsive behavior with calm, clarity, and confidence, even on your busiest days. This version includes scripts, swaps, visuals, and quick response interventions that you can start using immediately with your students who act before thinking. So this is definitely designed with you as the overwhelmed teachers in mind, and this pack will remove the guesswork and will give you simple, effective micro interventions that you can print and start using tomorrow. So check out the link in the show notes and you can get your $10 toolkit today. And you know why you're going to love this? Because it's fast, it's trauma informed, it's practical, it's visually calming, and it's immediately usable. So get yours today. Hey guys, welcome back. Behavior Strategies for Class here. And today we have our awesome Andrew Smith, behavior coach extraordinaire. And thankfully, we are here because we just went through lovely computer issues. That's why I'm wearing my lovely headphones. But you know what? We were determined to make this happen. So we are talking about impulse behavior. We have a student who really has been struggling with this in something has made him upset and he's like choking out somebody, the next person, the next one, he's like by the shoulders. He just reacts, not thinking. And so this was like, okay, I know we are not the only ones who struggle with students who have these impulse behaviors. So, we are going to talk about that, some of the causes, the some strategies on how to help, and really what is impulse behavior, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I guess the best way I kind of think of it as is that impulse behavior is the inability to think beyond the next action, right? So when we talk about as we grow and as we mature, um, we are able to think farther and farther along. And part of that's just because, more and more stacks up on us. The adulting gets hard and everything. But also biologically, like we're able to to like handle a lot more complicated things. And I found a great infographic, and just want to warn you, it was really tough to see if I could find a source for it, but I think it really just kind of goes through a lot of just the brain growth stages. And so the reason why I like to use any graphics to refer to this is that impulsivity is a natural part of like just development. Like kids are learning, where their fingers are, and when you learn where your
Right.
fingers are, you're gonna start sticking them in everywhere. That's your nose, your ears, the light socket, if you're me. And you learn to shock your butt a few times before
Yeah.
you're like, maybe that
Maybe I
doesn't
should
quite
do
work.
that. Yeah.
So that also brings up patterns of reinforcement, right? So I
Right.
explore my world, and then my behavior becomes shaped by patterns of reinforcement. There's then positive and negative. Did something get added or taken away, right? If we're talking about behavior therapy or behavior theory. Um, and so when I explore picking my nose, I find some nose gold, and that's chewy and delightful when you're like 2 or 3, or apparently 12 or 13, like my own kid. But the other part is that when you stick your finger in there and then something's taken away, you know, then that reduces some of the behaviors depending on what's going on. So those patterns start shaping our behavior. But when you're exploring, then it's very common to have very impulse driven behaviors because you have a new tool and you have a new way of doing it, um, and you just want to see where it applies to everything. So in a typical developing kiddo, they're going to find out new things. They're going to learn new words. That's why, those game lobbies when you're in like middle school, they're like they find that they're 4 cuss words and they're stringing them together in all sorts of different ways that don't make sense. And sometimes, there's some really funny ones, but other times it's like every other word. And that's part of impulsive behavior,
Yeah.
right? Not being able to regulate it, but also testing all of these things and not caring about the next step. Um, so some of this very much can be a developmental factor, right? Because
Right.
as we develop, I'm just going to refer over here to our nice, wonderful, colorful brain. Our brain develops from the bottom out towards the front and from inside to the outside, right?
Hmm.
So that
Yeah.
starts at gestation, and that, as you can see from around it, the frontal lobes and everything, synaptogenesis, the connections between all the different synapses, and it's very, as you grow through, age 10, 12, 15, they say by the time age 9 or 10, that 90% of your brain growth is done. So the major
Hmm.
physical structures usually are developed by then. And then we're talking about density. And then as you get dense and those neural fibers and everything, and synapses start forming and in greater clusters, they're able to connect more, and then others are pruned. So you're using what you need, and you're losing what you don't, right? It's using or losing.
Right.
Um, so then the problem with that is that frontal part is being the farthest from the main branch of the brain stem and the cerebellum and cerebrum and everything like that. That's the farthest way that gets developed the last. And they say 25 is a pretty common
Oh, yeah.
number that's listed in a lot of research, but there's a lot more that says like maybe 30 now, and then some say, well, you never really kind of your brain's always kind of adjusting. And but for a few of my friends, our 20s, that was pretty much just like our teens. So, um,
Yeah.
so maybe for a few of us, we're just a little bit slower on that end. Um, but that's where we do get to see some of those different structures start solidifying a little bit more and become a little bit more complex. And that's, once you have the major structures, then we're talking about density and the folds and everything like that. It gets, as life gets more complicated, our brain gets more complicated, even so. And that's where you see they talk about the trillions of connections of the dendrites and things like that. Um, you start creating those as you get older, and then you start shedding those as you age as well, because use it or lose it. So that
Right.
very much can be a developmental factor. Like, you get a 9 or 10-year-old, they're going to say some impulsive junk. and
Right.
not think about it because when you're that young, you live in a day-to-day world. Um,
Yeah.
but there's also parts of impulsivity that are related to some of the different mental health challenges or different developmental challenges that kids face. So the biggest one being, all of our acronym ones are ASD or autism spectrum disorder or ADHD and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And those are um, have markedly different impacts, but have similar behaviors too, right? The attention to details,
Right.
not picking up the details, things like that. But also, when you don't pick up the details or pay attention to details, then more impulsively, you're going to step over them. So, and they're also marked by lower frustration tolerance. So things just kind of jump out more and you can't handle as much because the stimulation becomes overwhelming more. And that leads to
Yes.
impulsivity too. Um, and so there's just a lot of different factors that come into that. So when we have some of the kiddos that have different challenges, they are heavily impacted by that. But some of our neurotypical or neurodevelopmentally sound kids end up having a lot of those challenges too. So it could be some developmental stuff, and it could be very much just parts of growing up.
That's great. Like the student I was talking about, he's a third grader. And granted, I work in an elementary school. So definitely there's a lot of impulse behavior all the time with everybody. But obviously, when you put hands on somebody, that behavior becomes a lot more concerning than, like a constant blurting in class or a constant like getting up, moving around the room, grabbing whatever, touching whoever. Um, so those are some of the concerns that we have dealt with our students. And so what are some ways that we can help them process, because we also feel like there is like some other dynamics, like you said, the environment, things going on that I don't think we know, obviously everything that's going on with this kiddo and why that just gut reaction, comes out. And so how do we help them kind of hopefully stop or at least give them to think before that gut reaction of overload, I feel, of emotion comes out and where they actually like hurt somebody.
Well, so those are good points, and those are good examples. Let's take the wandering around, and we'll dissect it in a couple different ways. Okay, so let's say we have an ADHD kiddo, right?
Right.
They're needing heavy stimulation, right?
Yeah.
Of preferred things, because if you
Yeah.
get heavy stimulation of preferred things, that for our ADHD kiddos, a lot of times that activates that dopamine reward sector of their brain, and they're like, "Bam, I love this. This is great. Feels
Yeah.
good." So when things don't do that, which I was pick on math, so I'm going to pick on math this time, but it's, just nailed their ELA, their language arts, their reading
Right.
time, like just no problem. They're, 5 levels ahead of everybody, right? Because that's their preferred part. And they're like, score, I love this.
Right.
Well, now that we switch subjects, they're not getting the same reinforcement internally as they would for
Mm.
others. So then what are they going to do? Are they going to sit and try and like push through this, which can be boring? It could be
Yes.
hard to like track concepts. It's not giving them the mental stimulation that they want. So, very much if they're not thinking ahead, like as in, I gotta learn this, I got state tests coming up, Mrs. B is gonna be on me if I don't do
Yeah.
this, then they're gonna start seeking stimulation wherever they can.
Mm.
And that's where you start seeing wandering, using the
Right.
bathrooms. Everybody's got to use the bathroom right
Yeah.
before math.
During math,
I've,
in between
yeah,
math.
for like 5 of my kids, like it's like there's always a potty break right before math, right? Like, okay, I get it, guys, but come on.
Yeah.
Um, so so that's where we start. If we know that, we can start trying to break that up or start tailoring our interventions to be able to give them a little bit of that stimulation or make that peak of getting to the stimulation a little bit shorter by starting off with them, helping them with some of those harder building blocks that take more of
Mm.
their reserve energy, let's say. So
Right.
for them, it might take twice as much energy as their neighbor to get over that hurdle to initiate the math task. So if we can
Hmm.
make that a little bit easier, be like, hey man, tell you what, I'm gonna do the first one, first two, because these are going to show you two different ways you could do this algorithm or this how you can solve this problem. Okay,
Right.
then all you got to do is take those two and do five more. Right, so we're
Right.
shortening the load so they're still having to do something. Like you still going to hold them accountable,
Yeah.
but you're also giving them a pattern. And ADHD kids love patterns because they can start making those
Yes.
connections of like, I can take this and I can copy this, right?
Hmm.
So it makes it a little bit easier. And when we make it a little bit easier, then they don't need as much dopamine and good feel and endorphins and things like that to
Right.
then become as stimulated. So, but then let's talk about our anxiety kids who will have
Yeah.
impulsive behaviors to get away from something they deem as threatening or um, not comfortable. And so, if we do the
Right.
same thing, then what we're showing them is they're showing them a level of modeling that's competent and increases confidence. And so, if we show them that this is a problem that can be solved and isn't like a bear on their back, then they're more likely to feel competent and confident in trying those and using those examples. So that's a couple different ways that we can parse that out about how we use one intervention. It helps in different ways.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just one example of in our classroom where we'll start seeing those behaviors and how we can start tailoring our interventions. When we see impulsive behaviors, as far as aggressive behaviors, then part of that's modeling um, what can be conflict resolution. Some of that is if it's related to frustration tolerance,
Hmm.
then then we start working on. And you had a great point of like stop, and we use in dialectical behavioral therapy or in cognitive behavioral therapy, what we would do is um, we would try to interrupt that think, feel, act, or that thinking, feeling behaviors and
Hmm.
actions
Hmm.
like triangle, and we'd want to interrupt somewhere in there. So I've had kids where we do the stop, think, act intervention. So they stop themselves, they think what's going to happen, and then choose another action from there. So
Right.
that's another way that we can teach that, as well as modeling and role playing some different scenarios so that they have a basis to draw on as well.
Yeah, that's definitely super important to be able to model that and talk it through. Because I think sometimes, like, this behavior happens, now they've had the consequence, and now we just move on. And not that we have to rehash, of course, the behavior constantly and, you know, making him feel bad, but just going over, like you said, okay, so what could change next time? So when like you said, you're getting frustrated, you're getting angry, whatever it is, how are you going to stop yourself? How are you going to look?
Absolutely.
Look away, walk away, whatever it is. um, and so one of the guys that we work with, one of the other parents, he's like, well, I just told him, are you going to walk away or are you going to do this? And he said, well, I'll walk away. And he's like, okay. And then we just forget about it. And I was like, well, he still needs to process like what happened, how he was feeling, and go through those motions as well. So I think also, I think one of the other ones, what is it? Naming that feeling,
Yep.
naming that emotion, and then processing through, but also, like you said, what is the action going to be? So that's super important, I think, as well. Um, and that's like, they say, name it, do a
Name
quick
it to tame it.
name it to tame it, right? And then kind of state that expected behavior. And that goes with the modeling as well. So I love that idea of having scenarios and going through different scenarios with them and letting them see, or how are they really going to react. Um, However, to switch, our kindergartner works with our speech therapist, and she's like, well, I work with him on this certain behavior and using, communication, and he does fine with me, but I know he doesn't really do that on the playground. And I'm like, well, it's a different
Yep.
situation, right? When you're just one on one. But to do the scenarios like when you're actually out on the playground, I
Yeah.
think is super helpful too. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Well, and I think that that perfectly encapsulates how learning happens, right?
Yeah.
When you're young, you're starting to learn all of these things and you're making those new connections, right? Um, and when we're older, we're able to learn something right away and then we're able to generalize it from there, right? Because we've learned how to do that many ways and our working table memory, right? Whatever we can hold in like let's say a working table, really we can more efficiently move it to our long term if we need to use it, right? The use it to lose it is think of it as the table, whatever's on the table. If I'm going to use it, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it on the table or take it and put it into storage. If I'm going to lose it, I'm going to swipe it off the table through to the dumpster, right?
Mhm.
And as we get older, our brain gets a little bit more efficient about being able to do that with more practice and just more repetition. So
Mhm.
we run into this quite a bit, especially our younger ones. Of like we give them the knowledge, so they have the knowledge, they have the rote knowledge, right? But
Right.
then to apply that is a different skill. And so it's going
Yeah.
past that short-term memory to be able to recall it in situations or in vivo, like the live things. And that's where the role plays the more what I always tell kids is that the more we practice it, the easier it is to recall. And the easier it is to recall, then the more likely you are to do that in a situation. It's
Mm.
not going to be right away. Or sometimes, usually it's not right away. Sometimes we get
Right.
lucky and things just
It
click or
sticks.
whatever reason. But but that's also because we connect it with other situations too. So the more chances we can practice it with a lot of other people, the more often, the easier it is to recall and the more likely we are to apply it forward. So just those kind of situations that story just encapsulates that of like the level of like we have knowledge, now we apply knowledge, and as we get older, that becomes a little bit easier to connect the two.
Right. Yeah, because obviously we can know all the right things to say or the right things to do, but if we don't actually do it, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. And obviously that applies through all of life, right? Um,
Absolutely. So far for me anyway. I don't know. I don't know about Mrs. B, but and who knows about Mrs. J, if
yeah,
she can come on here,
she's
maybe just to
or
just to call her out a little bit.
or the old, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
Really, don't watch me. I mean, what?
But
We'll get it
that's also
together.
where that's also where your reinforcement helps, right? So the
Yeah.
more like they are to do that and the easier it is for them to do that also helps with the reinforcement. Because if you heavily reinforce the good stuff, you're going to remember that a little bit easier too. Because you're going to have
Right.
better connotations connected to that, better feelings, all of that. So your
Yeah,
brain's going to prioritize that. Be like, this doesn't get me yelled at by Mrs. B. I get a big old high five.
that's right. Or you could get lucky and get a side hug, and those are the best too.
That's rare occasions from what I understand data
Yeah.
wise.
So, what can we do to help our students who are constantly blurting in class? I And I know some of it is like just the whole class management for some teachers, but I know there's also some kids like they just can't help themselves. Like they have something to say and they got to say it now and they have such a hard time like raising my hand, waiting until I get called on, or maybe I won't get called on. Nope, I just got to let you know. So, how
Yeah.
can we help those kiddos?
Well, thankfully, there's a ton of different strategies and a couple that really work. So, um, if you have your ADHD kiddos, they're more than likely visual people. So when
Yeah.
you need reminders, auditory reminders might just go one ear out the other. Especially, if you knew me growing up, it'd be like I don't know what you said, but I
Yeah.
know what I saw, right? So
Yeah.
if you have a visual reminder and a stop, think, act, and there's a ton. I mean, you
Yes.
can go Pinterest crazy on those, right? Of just any sort of just quick remember. You can put it on their desk. You could put it with there's
Yeah.
some that put a tactile thing on there with it. So like a piece of Velcro, like the soft side of the Velcro with that,
Right.
so they get a little stimulation that way. There are some fancy ones you can get off of Amazon that have a texture to it, and that just helps reinforce that so much to them. But whatever
Hmm.
mnemonic you use, whether it's the stop, think, act, whether it's raise your hand or the reminder that you do, a visual it's usually very helpful for a lot
Yeah.
of well, most of our impulsive kids. So having a visual of something like that that they can easily reference is great. Now, knowing your kiddo, if there are gaps in their learning, then maybe they're impulsively trying to answer because that's the only answer that they might know. So
Hmm.
maybe having talking to the teacher about prioritizing calling them first if it's an answer that they know, so that they can feel that thrill
Mm,
and
right.
being able to contribute, and that builds the confidence so that they feel like they could contribute in another form or fashion. But it also allows them to get the impulsive behavior out of the way as well. So sometimes that works. And I'd give that kind of a 50-50 depending on the kiddo.
Hmm.
Another is that having paper clips. So I've worked with a lot of kiddos that have impulsive questioning of like, when is this? When is this? When is this? Or
Yeah.
so I one teacher just had paper clips, or it was like clothespins. And so they got four in the morning, and
Oh,
they
okay.
could ask four questions. When they asked their question, they took one off, and it was an easier way for her
Keep
to
track.
just measure that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then when it was something like the goal was if he raised his hand, he never got penalized for that because that's what we wanted. Um, but if he had one, we start off with if you had one left, then you got your reward. So one left in the morning, you got a reward for the morning, and one left in the
Mm,
afternoon, you got that reward again. And then slowly worked up so that if he had three or something like that, and just builds
mm-hmm.
that stamina. So that's another way of doing that that can be, for some people, can be very easy as far as tracking it. You can get your
Mm-hmm.
data from that. Um, and it sometimes is just easier for teachers to track too, because Lord knows we got enough like data sheets, right?
Yeah.
The daily sheets and success sheets, they're useful, but there's a lot of them, and sometimes that's the easier way to do it.
Yeah.
uh, as far as building skills, that's where your SELs are, which teach you that stop, think, act, or teach you the cognitive triangle and how to interrupt at different parts, right? Like you need an act. If you're more of an action kid that needs a little bit of that, then we start feeding the action. If you're a feelings kid, we start with having you stop and reflect the emotion. So that's where your
Mm-hmm.
specialty, if you have a counselor, if you have a social worker, if you have SEL teachers or SEL paras that can do that, or they just go in and teach those SEL skills to start boost those, which could be just lagging skills, right? All of
Right.
those executive functioning skills that kind of all feed together.
Yeah.
Um, but realistically, a great way for kids to learn turn taking, frustration tolerance, um, yeah, the whole gamut of emotions is
Yeah.
just very much playing board games with them.
Oh,
Board
that's good.
games. Yep, you have to wait for the other person's turn. You can practice your etiquette too of like, can I have the spinner, please? So then they don't just impulsively grab it. So you're building in those stop gaps, those
Oh,
moments
okay.
that they can then have between their thought and their action, or their first action and then the appropriate actions, and we can start teaching from there. So shoots and ladders. I don't know how many times I've played that game. I've probably owned about 10 to 20 different copies of that game in my professional life. Uno's another one that's very easy. Like
Yes.
card
Kids
games are
love
easy.
Unos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's even ones that are like Angry Dragon or Mad Dragon, where it has some different conversation cards in there, and that can just help with prolonging um, that impulsivity and just like spreading it out, and as well as just having some great conversation tips or parts on coping and things like that. So there's a few different card games like that that are just have that built in, but any will do because you're trying to teach them the stop, think, and act, and just prolonging it. And so since it's in a um, non-confrontive Like,
Right.
they don't have to do any sort of academic learning. Most kids are more than willing to
Yeah.
throw in a game rather than going to math, right? If it gets to the point where some of those don't work, then it's falling back on your resources and your school procedures for maybe MTSS or RTI, or talking to the parents about, when's the last time they got to a pediatrician, and
Right.
going down that avenue, because that may be a factor for some kids. Um, you know, mental health challenges or disabilities, or however you want to phrase them, sometimes you need some other interventions as well that could be medical based. So just keeping the communication open, and some of these different strategies you can track very easily, that gives you and the parents and the school team data to be able to make some informed decisions for next steps, if things don't end up working or just need to be tweaked.
Right. Yeah, I love the games. Our kids also love all the games. They definitely love Uno. We had a couple kiddos play chess today because all of us adults, yeah, we don't know how to play chess. And of course, they would offer to teach us, but we know that will take very long. So we're like, hey, he knows how to play. How about you guys play? So that
Well,
works out really well.
well,
And they
if
actually
they're in the
did,
teacher role, then
yeah,
flipping the role and being the impulsive kid sometimes can be useful for
right.
them to have that recognition and self-awareness, depending on their age and who they are. Then you can be
Yeah,
impulsive Mrs. B instead of impulsive Johnny.
exactly. I think too, like, just like you said, like the mentoring buddy or whatever, giving those kiddos something. Um, I would say it's not a job, but to see how they can positively influence other kids and younger kids. I mean, we had one student, he's a challenging kiddo, but when he went to hang out with his kindergarten buddy, like it was like, who is this
Completely
kid?
different deal, right?
Yeah, like and at first he was like, I don't know what I should be doing, and I just kind of guided a little bit and then just stepped away, and like he did amazing, and he was so patient and he was encouraging to the kiddo, and yeah, it was just really great to see. So like if there's any way to have your older kiddos, all of them, like don't just, well, I don't think they would, no, it should be the whole class, all of the kids, get to pick a buddy or get to be with a buddy. I think
Absolutely.
that's super fun to see their growth, because when we put limits on them, they of course are going to put limits on themselves, and they already do,
Yeah,
so we want to push them in a way, like you said, it's not really confrontational, but we're pushing when them not really realizing it, right? Pushing them to do
yeah,
better, to be encouraging, to be that role model for somebody else.
absolutely. And sometimes what I found is, like, aside from oppositional kids and behaviors, like impulsive
Yeah.
kids and behaviors tend to wear you out the most, or more anyway.
Yeah.
And so this just gives you a chance to see them in a different light and see some of the spectacular parts of them that really do
Yes.
come part and parcel with some of the different challenges, right? Because
Yes.
if you get an ADHD kiddo who can create on their own, um, in
Yeah.
their own way, it is so amazing to see what they make, and to see the
Yes.
confidence and the just the light shine through them, and what they're doing, and that's really cool to see, and it just gives that more perspective for that kid, so that you have a little bit more empathy and respect for them too, because it can be it can be super challenging. It can
Yes.
be,
Agreed.
but it's super rewarding to see all of those parts of them too, in a more
Yes.
holistic fashion.
Yeah, in fact, I was talking to our PE teacher the other day, and one of our challenging kiddos was in there, but again, doing amazing and like, working with a team and being able to wait, that was modeled by, some of the other kids, and he didn't get mad or upset, where in the past he would be mad and be stomped and leave in the room, And just to see the growth there, but then to also see like, he can just be a kid, just be a kid and enjoy his peers and enjoy that interaction and playing a game was just the same, right? Just super rewarding and just heartwarming to see like him smiling and laughing and having a good time
Absolutely.
instead of, rolling on the carpet and hiding under a desk. So it was much better to see him in that way.
Yeah, it just brings more in the humanity and just more to get back to them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What are some other ways that we can help our kiddos with these impulse behaviors? Some of the things I looked up, we talked about already, like the role playing. Um, how about the 3-2-1, the grounding technique? What do you think about that one?
Yeah, grounding techniques are great, and they are coming more and more just incorporated into a lot of different places because it so many times like impulsivity can be that I am not aware of the different things that are happening in the moment, right? And then all of a sudden I come back to it, and then I feel like I have to act right away. And so grounding can give you that separation by just using your physical senses, and it helps when you do the 3-2-1 or the 5-4-3-2-1 or whatnot. You're using specific senses that are hardwired into the brain, so it's
Right.
almost like a mental reset. And so this would be like three things I see, two things I hear, one thing I smell, right?
Uh-huh.
Which may not go as well as it sounds, especially
Right.
when we're talking about like a whole bunch of kids, and those locker rooms when you're in like middle school or different or high school that could get really bad really quick, or it could be wonderful in the cafeteria, if it's tater tot
Right.
casserole day, right? So it just
Yeah.
it grounds you and it activates different areas of the brain. So it's almost that reset. And then I'm becoming aware, but I have that separation between thought and action to become aware. And so grounding can be useful in so many different ways for so many different kids. And so if you have an anxious kid, then that just keeps them from their mind looking backwards or forwards, which they become preoccupied with that just from the anxiety of looking around for different threats or different discomforts. Our trauma kids are very much along the same lines of if they're
Right.
hyper vigilant for any threats in the environment, and they can then seek out comforting sounds and things to start quieting the central nervous system. Like I said, very
Hmm.
much akin to anxiety. And for ADHD kiddos, it's that brain reset so that they can find some more of their stimulation that they want, or their brain starts coming down from a different stimulation to stimulate itself rather than seeking like an external factor. So there are awesome ways to do that. And those are quick ways that kids can memorize because we all know about the five senses or the five major
Right.
senses, and it's taught a lot in our science classes as kids. So it's very useful, and they're doing it on their own too, trying to seek out different things. So it can be just that quick focus break to then move to another subject area. Just helps with transitions in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one is a great strategy to use as well. And I think along those lines, breaking up that mental block or wherever they are is that movement breaks, which I think
Oh yeah.
is super helpful for a lot of our kiddos too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, if you can get bilateral stimulation, so left and right working together, or left and right stimulation of some sort. So physical would be, doing some hopscotch. Big thing is with OT and some other places is infinity walks. So you're just able to try and walk in an infinity sign, like either with their
Oh, okay.
in the classroom or in the back, or just having different actions that activate both sides because it crosses the midline of the brain so that
Right.
we're then not getting stuck in physical loops because a lot of our kids can get stuck in physical loops in their brain. The same neural cycle is just firing over and over again. And that could be the anxiety. That could be the looking for stimulation of like, man,
Right.
this isn't as good as yesterday. Man, this isn't as good as yesterday. Man, and then you have a quick go noodle break and you're not think about yesterday anymore because your brain had a chance to work different areas and fire different centers of the brain. So that bilateral stimulation that you can do with those exercise breaks is really key. Um, as well as then you're doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're engaging different senses too. So you can have
Yeah.
there's a sensory walks are a really great thing that are becoming more and more common. So you're walking, so you get the ambulatory, that exercise, that bilateral part of walking. And then some places will have different textures on the board to explore. So our ASD kids, our anxiety
Right.
kids can find some comforting tactile sensations, or and our ADHD kids get different stimulation that can be a little bit more comforting. And so there's just a lot of different ways that can be really good, as well as the Go Noodles are just. I mean, those are always
Yes,
fun
I
for
love
me.
those.
You get some really bad dancing, and I don't care because you know what? You're in second grade,
That's right.
so so I'm over there, busting a move in the back too.
That's right.
So it's great for me
Exactly.
as an adult to get that, like I got paid to take a quick dance break or 30-second dance party, right?
Yeah. The kids love
That's good
that.
in my book. Yeah, and the kids do well too. I mean, some of them can really cut a rug, as they used to say.
That's so true. And then some, it's just so cute to see, like, whoo, there's no rhythm going on there. But you know what? They're moving, they're having fun, they're getting that brain break. So
They
that's
can't sing, but they
awesome.
are gonna be loud when they do it.
Exactly.
It's like sing a girl.
So I think, we've touched on a lot of good things, and I hope this will help some of these all the educators out there who are listening, because I know all of us are dealing with kiddos that have these impulse behaviors. Is there anything that you want to leave us with, Andrew?
Don't just stop, think, act. Your first reaction is not always your best reaction. So that's usually what I tell kids. And so if you want to steal that, feel free, because I think I stole it from somebody else. And it just kind of helps give them some perspective in that. And when we stop and we have that perspective, then we can start working on building from there.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, as always, I always appreciate all of your time, your effort, your patience, especially with these lovely computer issues and my issues, all of the fun
Just going
things.
to give us more gag reel stuff. So.
Exactly. All right, Andrew, we will see you next month. Thanks so much.
All right, pleasure's all mine.
Before you go, hit that subscribe button, share this podcast, share this episode with any other educators you know so we can continue to learn and grow together. See you next week. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate your support. And if I have encouraged you, motivated you to continue to learn, to support your students, even better, to help them strive in your classroom, please leave a review, hit that subscribe button so that others can see they can learn and grow here as well. Thank you.